don't know if this is working or not. I suppose we'll see in a second, really. I think so. I think it's working. Right, okay. So, if it is working, then hopefully I'm able to put this straight onto YouTube. Had a few issues with the actual streaming platform I was going to use. Google Hangouts has been removed or changed or something along those lines. As a consequence, I can't put things directly as easily onto YouTube. I have no interest in paying for a service, so unfortunately, the quality of the production is going to remain fairly low. But hopefully, able to go forward from there. I think. Just bear with me whilst I sort out the organisation of this, because I've done this for quite a few years. So for a second, I'll sort of summarise what I'm doing whilst I'm trying to sort out the rest of this. I wanted to have a look at a few of the things I'd seen, like on the Guardian and a few other sites, in regards to like the news and stuff. But because I'm dreadful when it comes to actual like organising this channel of like the videos I put on here, I was just going to stream it, nice and simple, get it nice and sorted. However, it's not as easy as I thought it was. It's not as easy as it used to be. So it's taken a bit of time to actually organise and sort of set it up. It's like very organised now, really, because I'm still sorting it out. But once I'm sorted, I hope to discuss a few things that I think encapsulate some of the issues that are quite important in society to discuss at the moment. Let's see, is this working? Yeah, no, I think so. Right, okay. So the first one I saw, it's quite personal to me actually as a student, as someone who's having to contend with things like this. It's a bit of a macabre headline. It says tenant killed himself after landlord failed to resolve repeated noise complaints. And it's a fairly, standard story. You get a lot of this in the UK at the moment. Essentially, a person has been in such a situation of strife that they've ended their own life, which is quite unpleasant to read about. It's quite a nasty thing to hear. But when you look into the details of the story, you really get a sense for how perilous things are in the country at the moment. So he's had an issue with noise. He's had an issue with the ability to relax in his own home, which is quite serious. It's not nice to contend with things like that. And so as a result, he went to his landlord, asking for help. And as it says here, he was told he was whining, which is just the sort of thing you want to hear about when you're going to someone with an issue about your life, whining. So obviously you've got a lack of compassion immediately, right? Like someone's been told that the conditions that they live in are not their concern. It's a whine to complain about it, which is quite insulting, but really shows you the power dynamic that exists here, right? Like a person's own livelihood, a person's own space of living, their right to housing, really, as a human being, is being controlled by someone who has no regard for their interest. And of course they don't, right? A landlord ultimately is someone profiting off a human right, someone who's in charge of where you live, and has deemed it suitable to make money off. So whilst you naturally get some people who are going to have more compassion, it's a ripe market for people like this to come in and dismiss the claims of the people who actually live there. But there's this horrible sort of aspect to it, where a person is dead because of it. That person isn't going to come back. They're not going to be able to say anything more about what's happened. We've now just got the word of the landlord to describe this henceforth. Obviously, there is the ombudsman. There's a person who's got responsibility to investigate and to discuss these issues. But I think the idea that an ombudsman is going to change particularly much is a little hopeful, really, when you've got this sort of subheading here. He's asked the housing association to apologise. The landlord's got to say sorry, and it's nice in principle. It's a sign of acknowledging something was wrong and moving forward and asking them to improve in future. But an apology is not going to bring back the person who's dead. The family of that person has lost them forever. The country no longer has that citizen in it anymore. They're dead. And so, an apology being the extent of the system's ability to address these matters is a real situation, because it's a real dilemma for the legitimacy of the system as it exists today, right? It's not good enough at all, because you can guarantee there's more than just this person who is in this situation, and it's probably much more serious issues as well than just a noise complaint. There's probably it's not probably actually, there are cases of serious hygiene issues, serious space issues, serious degradation of property, and ultimately a lot of the landlords in charge of them aren't taking responsibility for them, because ultimately it's their property. They're free to do what they want with it, or to not do what they are supposed to for people, and so don't have the need to do anything with it, to treat it in a way that's going to be livable for people. And the idea as well that whining is the the sort of a summation of this of the tenants' complaints, really goes to show that an apology being sought isn't going to do a lot if a landlord has this attitude towards it, towards a person and their needs to have a suitable place of housing, place of home. Then what good is that apology really going to do? Because ultimately the issue that was at play here, the fact that a person did not have a calm place to call home, did not have conditions right for sleep, and let's not forget, sleep is crucial to any person's life, crucial to having a healthy state of mind, healthy body, healthy just day-to-day existence. If that can't be maintained, then what purpose are they serving as a landlord? And the answer ultimately can be found in the fact that they're not really there for to maintain the land for a person. They're there to make money off the property, to sustain their lifestyle, and ultimately that lifestyle is not going to run alongside the needs of the person living in a property. And it is sad, it's sad that to ignore the adverts, it's sad that someone can feel so overwhelmed they didn't see any way out. That's the case for a lot of people in the country. A lot of people have really tricky housing situations, and 90% of it, I reckon, could be sorted quite quickly if the housing they were living in was being run by a force in society that acted for good, acted for the will of the people, acted in the best interest of the people who actually lived there. And under the system we have currently, that's not the case. Essentially, it's whoever can pay for the land gets it, and the people who own the land currently, most of them, are in a position that sees their monetary interests come first. It's sad. It is really sad to see. And when you see when you're someone who's in a situation that is looking for housing as well, like it's a sobering thought that these are the sort of people that you're going to have to be interacting with on a sort of frequent basis. And it's a lottery too, because you could potentially find someone who's going to be kind and consider your needs and all of that equally. As you find someone who's going to be like this, who's not going to pay you the respect that you deserve as a human being, right? As a person looking for a house, looking for a place to live. So it is sad. It is just sad to see, I think. And hopefully, moving forward, people, given the extent of the crisis, will have this at the forefront of future political action, future direction and discourse. So with an election coming up, you'd hope that anyone in opposition to the current way of doing things, the current government, if they really were to care for the people, would take a nice firm left-wing stance on housing and consider the rights of people to actually have affordable, suitable, livable housing. And so in a similar vein to where I just came from, the government, here's our next one. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he's very excited to be interviewing Elon Musk, and here's a nice little image. It's a bit of a crass one, it's been taken by someone in the crowd, but you've got Mr. Sunak there, our Prime Minister, and you've got Elon Musk there, owner of Twitter, or X, as it's now called. And I think that this sort of tells you the direction of the government as it exists today. This sort of encapsulates much of the issue with the country and why things like we've just seen with the tenant who sadly passed away, why that's the case, why things like that happen. Because ultimately, our country is being operated by people like this. This man here is one of the richest men in the world. I think he is the richest person in the world at the moment. And this person here, our Prime Minister, is also a billionaire. He has shares and investments in companies that are ridiculously wealthy, far wealthier than any individual tenant can ever hope to be in several lifetimes, several thousand lifetimes, really. And so when you've got a country that is pretty much operated for the interest of these sorts of people, you're not going to see the direction we need for individuals in the wider sort of collective, the wider public, to get along, to get by in life. Ultimately, people with this colossal amount of wealth, basically business connect as well, their interests are going to shape the outline of the country and its policies. And so perhaps in a fairer society, we'd see tenants be put first and people who want to live somewhere be put first and be given a place that they can afford to manage and have a bit of autonomy in their lives. But that's against the business interests of these individuals. If you're a billionaire, then you've made that money by massively shaping the resources and the way those resources are used in society. And when the Prime Minister is, he's excited to meet someone who's like, the richest person in the world, basically, like that tells you the direction of the right-wing government we've got in place. That tells you that ultimately the interests of the country are not the first thing on this person's mind, or if they are, the country's interests, then they're the interests of people who are so wealthy that day-to-day issues just don't come into their radar. It's just things they're not into, things they're not bothered about actually discussing. If you go down this thread, you've got a few of the things they discussed. You've got AI being spoken about here. You've got Elon Musk sort of going off his usual sort of Reddit-based like nonsense stuff about Twitter and free speech and all that. Then you've got this sort of frightening line about low tax and high risk, high reward. And it's interesting they use that language because it really masks the truth behind what's sort of going on with current policy. The risk is high, but it's not ever for people like Rishi Sunak or Elon Musk. It's for people who live in the country, because ultimately the resources that are being mismanaged are ones they need to live, but ones that billionaires and the extremely wealthy corporations that are harboring themselves in the country can pay the way out of. If resources in the country are mismanaged, they can buy ones that in their own personal life they can buy whatever they need to survive. The tenants, like we saw in that previous article, do not have that luxury. They're in a position where their day-to-day life is being operated on a very tight budget, and thus they can't afford to risk changing their household, or running out of groceries, or using things in a way that's going to be particularly ostentatious. Like, they're in a precarious position. So when you've got people discussing things like high risk, high reward, it's a real, it's a misnomer, it's a myth. It's not an accurate reflection of the day-to-day lives of people in the country, especially to the high reward as well. Like, if you've got the money to actually pump into industry and to buy capital and invest, then sure, there is a potentially massive payout waiting for you. But who's got that money realistically? Certainly not the day-to-day person. If they invest the amount they would expect to get back from it, they're going to go bankrupt. Like, they're not going to have the money to actually start up anything that's going to give them meaningful, like, life-changing rewards. More realistically, and what you see a lot in the country, is people turn to things like gambling to try and make it quick, and losing massively, and then ending up destitute and homeless and dead. Like, the reality of a risky society where supposedly like making plucky ventures is going to get you to the top is a lot of people losing out, which is the nature of a business too. Like, to become a billionaire like these people, you have to have exploited some people along the way. Elon Musk, for instance, his family got rich via diamond mines in apartheid South Africa. Like, the people that were being, pushed down to make him rich were literally legislated against based on the color of their skin, kept in destitution and withheld, political power and the right to vote and the rights to really exist as a full human being, so that people like the Musks could get wealthier. Mining diamonds in a country where black people aren't considered fully human, like it writes itself, right? And this is the sort of person that Rishi Sunak, our prime minister, he's not Democrat, he's not elected, by the way, not a person that we voted for, a person who has taken office based on another Tory, not who wasn't elected, being kicked out of office. This is the sort of person that he thinks it's exciting to meet, that the country should be basing itself around. And you've really got the whole story in itself here. Like, it's not democratic, it's not for the people, it's not really going to help anyone unless you are as wealthy or in the same sort of bracket as these men. Like, it's a sad state of being when the country is being operated like this. But I think it is just sad. And then on a similar wavelength to this, you've also just got the fact that there's nothing really, and thinking of democracy, we can't change the fact that this is the way our country is being run and operated for at least a year. The election I've read recently is supposedly going to be Halloween next year in this country, 31st of August, 31st of October 2024. That's almost a year away. That's a few days off a full year. How much more can this government do in the time that's between now and then? And I'll tell you what sort of things they are planning. Here's the Lex headline. Plan to brand anyone undermining the UK as extremist. Now, this comes in the face of the recent protests in favour of a ceasefire in Palestine for the Palestinian people, and an end to the missile strikes and violence and the death being wrought upon Palestine by the current missile strikes. And you've got a very noble cause here. You've got in London here lots of protesters, who just have been appalled by the actions happening, the countless dead, the constant violence, and they want to stop to it. And the response of the government is more legislation against protests, more legislation against anti-UK issues, they're calling it, which is an incredible slight against what is actually happening here, right? Like, the people in this protest quite clearly want people to survive. They don't like the fact that people are getting bombed and killed indiscriminately by a bloodthirsty army, right? Like, the violence is unprecedented, it's terrible. And instead, the government is seeing this expression of discontent with current policy, and seeking to legislate against it. There's already been several anti-protest bills and policies put in place by the Conservative government, and this is another one. You've got Michael Gove trying to classify this as anti-extremism, but realistically, extremism in this definition is being used to classify anything that opposes government policy to a visible extent as being extreme. And in some ways, it is, when the government have gone so far extreme in many of their policies, in some ways it is a form of extremism to oppose one extreme. If you're far away from something that is quite far already to the right, then of course you are going to be extreme in comparison to this. But realistically, it is not an extreme position to want peace, to want an end to violence, to want people to be able to live lives that don't end prematurely by indiscriminate missile strikes and devastation to basic infrastructure like hospitals and schools and universities. Like, the fact that a government is planning to crack down on people who are expressing their democratic right to protest, their right to be able to express their opinion and their freedom, and their wish for others to have that opinion and those freedoms. The fact that the government's going against that is terrifying, because you've got to think, like, if you look at the climate that we're in currently, like the discontent against current Conservative policy, the widespread loathing of our current government, our unelected prime minister, if this is allowed to pass through, then what is the extent that the government can brandish the law against someone? If you oppose oil fields being opened up and continue drilling and fracking, does that make you an extremist? Well, yes, under this. And we can see that lots of the environmental protests, the people who are rightfully outraged at the lack of action on the climate, the worsening of the climate, get arrested, put in jail for a bit, and we've got a criminal record all of a sudden. What if you oppose the complete lack of action taken regarding healthcare? The NHS is not being funded properly. It's had funds taken out of it. There's privatization happening increasingly with our ambulances, with sections of healthcare, with doctors. And, the government are doing this quite relentlessly. They're trying to sell off as much as they can to make as much money as they can off a state asset. People don't want this. It's a widely unpopular decision. But, if you protest this, then you're against UK values. You're against something that the government decided is a part of British identity. Only go onto a watch list. Maybe you want to teach about protest and about the civil rights movement, and you want to help people understand the history of how left-wing activists and labor movements have won the rights of the people to exist as freely as they can in our country. Well, now protesting is going to get to government. It's against the law and order of the country. It's illegal. It's bad. You go on a watch list as well. You're an extremist, and all of a sudden you've now got surveillance and the ability for the police to arrest you based on this supposed extremity, and your position, your job maybe is gone, and you're in a pretty bad situation. And this is the stuff that's been threatened here by the government, by our terrible Home Secretary, who, here it says, describe pro-Palestinian demonstrations as hate marches. Where's the hate? The hate very clearly is from the government, from people like Suella Braverman, really, right-wing, fascist almost. It's not almost really, it is fascist. Actions against freedom and all about preserving the power of this government and cracking down on people who wish to express their discontent with the current actions of the government. I think it's disgusting that the discontent at the current actions in Palestine, the misery and the literal death and fire that's been put on these people, to speak out against that is seen as extremist, is seen as hate. That's not the view of most people. That's you look at the global protest against this from all races, religions, ethnicities, backgrounds. So many people of all stripes of life have come out against and spoken out against what's going on at the moment. And the government don't care. They have their policy. They want to maintain their policy, their power, and they're cracking down on it. And it's a scary thought that a lot of people will be treated with the same manner as genuine threats to public safety. Sadly, one of which is members of our current government, who clearly have no regard for the health of the public good, and are clearly acting in their own political interests, or their own sort of preserving their own political power. It's a scary time, and it needs serious opposition. And on the topic of opposition, I think we'll end the final headline that I saw, which I thought was quite nice, was this one here. So Bangladesh is a country that has become a place of cheap labor for lots of companies based in the global West, so Britain, America, all those sorts of countries, to build factories and pay people ridiculously limited amount of pause that. That's probably a little bit distracting. It's good to have factories that we can dump lots of unfair place lots of unfair conditions on the workers there, pay them minimal, ridiculously small wages to make things really cheaply, to then sell on at a much higher price in Western countries to break in massive profits. The bosses of H&M, Gap, Zara, all the sorts of clothing companies, all the the companies that are based in have their retail shops and their sort of selling of goods in the West primarily, but have their labor pool for primary production in countries like Bangladesh. They're worth millions, billions even, and they have those billions off the basis of incredibly exploitative conditions in countries like Bangladesh. But as it says here, as you can see in the video, as you can, if you wish to go and see the video yourself, there's protest. There's people who have realized that, if not realized, they've obviously known, but like they've organized themselves as a labor movement, and they're now trying to get more for their labor, which is fantastic. It's a sign that if you protest, you can shut down 300 factories. You can show that your labor is worth more than being paid pennies and being treated like a prop. Like, you are a valued and crucial part of any economy. Labor is what any economy is built on. Any economy relies on the work of everyone in society, and thus, in a truly fair society, labor should be what determines what happens in society. The power of the workers, the common good, the collective. If you've got a society that's truly democratic, then you would not have moneyed interests at the top determining things like the housing market, like the decision of who gets to speak and what is counted as extremism. It would be a collective decision. It would be something that is done for the good of everyone, democratically. And when you see protests like this, it's really encouraging because it shows that the fight for a better world is one that takes place across the globe. That involves everyone from Bangladesh to Britain, from Bhutan to Brunei to I'm trying to think of Burkina Faso to Belgium. It's everywhere. It's every country, not just ones beginning with B either. So I think it's really it should be taken as an inspiration that even in some of the worst working conditions in the world, where exploitation is rife, and there's not as much ability for workers to be able to enjoy the relative luxuries we get in the West, where we do have more protections, which were, I will stress, fought for and put blood on the line by people like this, by workers who fought for weekends and child protection laws and the ability for kids to go to school and every right you can think of. They were fought for. These workers are doing the same, and we need more of it worldwide. We need to have a global consensus and global worker united front to be able to have the change we want in the world. So when we see things like this in countries, be it in Bangladesh or in Britain, we've got to be united. We've got to fight for the fight for the right. We've got to be able to move towards a better society through fighting for human rights, fighting for workers' rights, fighting for peace and prosperity for all, and fighting against the interests of a system that only cares about profit and money and power. And through left-wing action, we can achieve that, hopefully, in our lifetimes. I'm sure, it seems bleak and it seems like things aren't going to get better, but, you've got to look at how far we've come from feudalism, through monarchies, through autocracy, through global wars. We are going to get there, just hopefully, hopefully soon, one day. Anyhow, I think that'll do for now. 4 headlines or 4 news bits I saw. Hopefully, I'm sort of going to try and do it, collect a few and do it every once in a while. We'll see how it works. I'm not exactly going to have an organized schedule or anything when it comes to this, but hopefully it's all sounded all right. Hopefully if you're watching this back, then it's not atrociously coming across on anything. We'll see though. We'll see. Anyhow, if you did listen, thank you. I'm of the opinion that even if only one person, on the planet listens to this, that one person has still heard something, right? It's still a force for good. It's still a positive drop. You got to think of it in terms of physics, right? If you even one drop in the ocean can create a tidal wave. I'm not saying that I'm going to create a tidal wave, but it counts as something, right? I'll say positive. Anyway, thank you for listening, and hopefully I'll do this again at some point soon.